Hello, welcome back to Mad Times with Madison Harvey. Say hi, Harvey. So I figured. If you are on the Patreon, you already know this, but this episode might be a little short, and I'm usually very good about editing these ones now and like including all of the chapters and stuff. For mostly YouTube is for the chapters, but if you ever scroll in the notes, that did not want to work. If you ever scroll down to the description and the notes of the episode, I include timestamps of when every section of the episode will start. So it'll usually go like background, the start of the crime, the trial, the sentencing, the aftermath, things like that. All of that to say that this episode probably will not have that unless I can like easily find it, because I ruptured my eardrum over the weekend in like a very calm and not dramatic way. Thank you, Harvey, so much. I had an earache for like a week. I was like getting dizzy from it. I go to urgent care. She's like, you have some fluid behind your ears, whatever. If you take Sudafed Flonase, it'll like open the tubes back up to drain all that shit and you'll go back to normal. I'm like, perfect, whatever. I didn't really expect them to do much about it anyway. So that was Friday. Saturday night, we have this like headache suction thing. I don't know if you've ever seen one. It's for like pressure headaches and migraines, where you like squeeze the suction, you put it in your ear, and it'll like relieve some of the pressure and the air out of your ear hole. Well, Saturday night, have a bit of a headache. I stick this suction thing in my ear, and no hurt, no nothing. I didn't even know anything happened. I pulled the suction out, and it's clear. It's just like a clear little suction tube. So I pull it out of my ear, like, awesome, all done with that, and it's just like, trigger warning, full of blood. Like, literally full, like an alarming amount, but like it didn't hurt. So my mom's freaking out. We're like certain that like I have suction part of my brain out or something. I went to see an ENT on Monday for unrelated things. And she said like there is some trauma there, but it's fine. It's like not that bad. But like I can't wear my headphones in that ear. And I could edit with one headphone, but the truth and the bottom line of it is I don't like wearing one headphone. It's like very disorienting for me, and it just makes it impossible to concentrate because I can hear what's happening outside of my headphone. So my attention span is like just shot to hell. So this episode might be kind of short because I shouldn't really be wearing over the ear headphones either, but they're not as bad, so I think I can get away with it for a little bit. But the editing I use like my in-ear earbuds for, because it's just makes it easier to concentrate, and I just like don't feel like doing that. But I will be giving you an episode, so there's that. And if you're wondering, it doesn't hurt at all. We were reading that like ruptured eardrums either hurt extremely bad or they don't hurt at all. Like if you had already had an earache like I did and your eardrum ruptures, it just sort of like relieves all of that pain, which is what happened to me. Like my ear instantly didn't hurt. I was like in the kitchen drinking rosé and bleeding out of my ear hole, and I'm like, wow, I feel great. I feel perfectly fine. And my mom's like Googling worst case scenarios. So all that to say that. So I'm sorry for that, but it shouldn't take very long for me to be able to get back to normal. In the meantime, I am going to be I debated making this a short one because I do think it's going to err on the short side. But I think it's a really good one to do, and it's going to tie into another one that will either be short or it'll be next week's long one. So I'm going to be doing the murder of Adam Walsh this week. If you think you haven't heard of this case, I promise you that you have. Well, like I don't promise because like I like can't promise that you have, because perhaps you really have not, but you are probably familiar with the case and some of like the fallout and things that this case sort of put into motion. So, on July 27th, 1981, 6-year-old Adam Walsh went to Sears with his mom to do some shopping in Hollywood, Florida. I always think it is so funny when places like that exist. It's sort of like Ohio has Miami, Ohio in it, which The Office sort of made fun of. They had, like, at the end when they were doing all of that weird stuff, they had Kelly Kapoor transferred to their Miami office. So she, like, gave away all of her winter coats and stuff. And they were like, does she know that Miami is in Ohio? So it should be, like, screen names, I feel like. Like, there should be the main one. Hollywood, California, Miami, Florida, things like that. And then, like, if you also want to have that name, it has to be, like, Hollywood with 2 zeros, 47, Florida. You know, that's just what it should be. Anyway, they're shopping at Sears, which I also miss. Sears and Kmart. Like, not everything needs to be a Target or a Nordstrom, okay? Like, give me back the low-budget department stores with, like, 4 collapsing ceiling tiles and, like, a random bucket in the necklace section to, like, catch water falling out of the ceiling in that exact location. Like, please give me that back. So Adam's mom, Reeve Walsh, needed to go look at the lighting section, but Adam was distracted with the toy section. Obviously, he saw some teenage boys playing, like, a demo Atari game, which, like, used to be a thing up until, I don't even know if it is still a thing. I haven't been inside of, like, an electronics store like this in a long time. But you could, like, stand inside, like, a Walmart and, like, play a GameCube for hours. Like, they would have this whole demo section set up. So Adam's mom was like, okay, the light section is only a few aisles away, and she knew what she needed out of there, so she was only going to be gone, like, 10 minutes. So she let him stay over there with the other boys, watch them play the game, whatever. So Adam goes to watch the boys play this game. Shortly after that, a security guard came and asked the boys to leave because they were being too rowdy, as boys usually are. So Adam gets roped into this, sort of, like, this whole group that are getting kicked out. And he's just too nervous and shy to tell the security guard that his mom was still in the store with him. And, like, he wasn't actually with these other boys. So he ended up leaving the store with these boys. Well, Reeve returns to the toy section to get Adam, but he is gone. She obviously panics and has security page Adam to, like, return to wherever, like, if your name is Adam Walsh, your mom's looking for you, blah, 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 blah. Well, obviously Adam's not in the store anymore. Like, he is gone. But the guards, like, have not put that together yet. Like, nobody's communicating with anyone. It's all a mess. So Reeve and her husband, John, launch a search for Adam. However, it appeared that Adam just, like, literally vanished. They couldn't find any trace of him. The store wasn't really searched fast enough, I don't think. There was, like, minimal communication. So they did, like, their own search, and nothing came of that either. That is until August 10th, 1981, a few weeks after Adam had gone missing. 2 fishermen found Adam's severed head in a drainage canal 130 miles away from the Sears where he was last seen. His body was never found, never recovered. His murder would go unsolved for years until a man actually confessed to it. However, it was not that easy, and the road that followed this confession was wild as hell. So the confession comes from a man named Otis Toole and, by proxy, Henry Lee Lewis. These two are infamous serial killers who confessed to hundreds of murders, rapes. They admitted to being cannibals, and they, like, admitted to doing a ton of kidnappings in the 70s. At one point, it was said the number of their crimes could be, like, in the 600s of, like, people they had done crimes against. Sorry that my microphone just cut out. That one was very clear that time. I'm going to get a new cord, I promise, when the Patreon money deposits. So when you hear that, like, someone has confessed to crimes in the 600s, it obviously leads to a little doubt. Like, surely you did not commit over 600 depraved crimes against a bunch of separate people. They actually got the nickname the Confession Killers, if you have ever heard of that. It ties in at the end, but that's who these people are. So these two eventually split up. They were placed in separate prisons around the same time. Lucas was in prison in Texas, and Toole was in prison in Florida. So Toole learned that Lucas was going around confessing to crimes, showing police crime scenes, things like that. So Toole was like, well, I'm going to start confessing to crimes then. Like, if this is what we're doing, this is what we're doing. So Toole tells the police, like, we actually only committed 108 crimes. Because Lucas is the one who was telling police that they had committed over 600 crimes. So Toole's like, he's a liar. He's a liar. We only committed 108 exact, precise crimes. So Toole did confess to abducting Adam Walsh from a Sears department store in Hollywood, Florida, before raping and dismembering him with the help of Lucas. So he's like, we did this and we did it together. Well, then Toole realizes that Lucas was already in jail when Adam Walsh was murdered. So then he changed his story. He's like, well, actually, I kidnapped Adam Walsh alone. Like, he wasn't involved. I still did that. So he said he lured Adam into his car with toys and candy. He said when Adam started crying, he beat him until he was unconscious, raped him, and then cut his head off with a machete. He then drove around and forgot that Adam's head was in his car. And when he remembered, he tossed it into the canal where it was found. Allegedly, Toole claimed he wanted to take Adam as his adopted son, but when he realized that wouldn't work, he killed him. He then claimed that he burned Adam's body inside of an old refrigerator. However, he is a known liar. This is what we know, he lies all the goddamn time. And that would explain why the body was never found, but it doesn't explain, this is personally what I'm saying confusing to me. It doesn't explain why he kept Adam's head, and then he claimed he forgot he had it. If he went through the trouble to find a fridge in Jacksonville, put Adam's body inside, and then burn it. Like, if you are doing all of that, how are you forgetting that you have the head in your car? It just doesn't make sense. Unless he purposefully kept Adam's head. I have no idea. It's just an odd detail that sort of sheds light on the odd scenario that he had kept Adam's head and body separated. If that makes sense to you. I might be rambling, but it just is so weird that he obviously did not immediately burn Adam's body because he had to find a full-ass refrigerator. So how do you do all that, not burn the head, say you forget the head, whatever. It just doesn't make sense to me. So, alongside that, the evidence against Toole was very controversial. When he confessed to this crime, they searched his car with luminol, which detects the presence of blood, and they found what would appear to be the outline of Adam's face on the carpet of the car, like in blood, on the luminol showing. Not everyone believed this. John Walsh, Adam's dad, was a large believer that that was Adam's face on the carpet of this weird pervert's car. Other people questioned that if it was anything at all and compared it to the grilled cheese Jesus, aka the grilled Jesus, which is an amazing episode of Glee. Honestly, all episodes of Glee are iconic, which if you haven't watched Glee because you think it's cringy, I literally have to tell you that's almost the entire point. It's it's sort of in on the joke. And the pop culture references and jokes and things like that are so on point, so funny. If you haven't watched Glee, please do. And honestly, if you love some of their covers of these songs, guys, they're amazing. They're great. If you have never heard Naya Rivera sing Valerie, it'll change your life. Where were we? Okay, if you're not familiar with the Jesus food incidents at all, basically people claim to see holy figures and pieces of food, but it's a weird burn mark from the pan that sort of looks like the Virgin Mary, or a Cheeto that looks like a wiener, things like that. People seeing things in the foods. So anyway, not everyone's buying this, quote, hard-hitting evidence. Basically, sort of being people are seeing what they want to see because they very much want that to be true. Some people are saying well, of course, John Walsh thinks that's the imprint of Adam's face on the car because he wants this to be solved. He wants this to be the man who murdered Adam because he's right here. They have him. Who wouldn't want that? But they're saying you could look at this and see anything. However, like I said, investigators were unable to locate Adam's body where Toole claimed to have buried it, and without any physical evidence, the Florida State Attorney couldn't prosecute the case. Obviously, you can't commit someone of a crime that you have no evidence of. And several months later, Toole recanted his confession of kidnapping and murdering Adam Walsh. In the years that followed, Toole repeatedly confessed to killing Adam Walsh and then took back his story, just like reminiscent of Jorn Vandersloot and Natalie Holloway. He confessed and unconfessed to murdering her hundreds of times. And if you are not a Patreon, because I think I only did that update on the Patreon, he did like finally full on confess. He told exactly what happened, which I think is a believable story. It's on the Henry Siviak episode of Patreon, and if you are a subscriber on Apple, it's right there for you on your feed. Basically, he said that he made advances onto Natalie that she was not interested in, and I think the order of it was like she had like kneed him in the crotch, something like that, and he kicked her in the head so hard that like he wasn't sure that she was alive anymore. And then he bashed her head in with a cinder block and drug her body into the ocean. And if you're wondering why it's believable, not only is that scenario believable, I believe fully that whatever happened to her is because she rejected him. It was part of a plea deal from when he extorted Natalie's family. He had them wire money to him in exchange for the address of where Natalie's body was, or where she was murdered, but like the building hadn't even been built yet, type of situation. So he was actually arrested for extorting them for money. And as a part of that plea deal, he had to tell them what actually happened to Natalie. If you're actually not familiar with the case of Natalie Holloway, it's one of like the last ones that me and Taryn did together. You can still find it on the feed. I didn't erase our old episodes or anything. I implore you to listen to it because it's fantastic. And if you are not subscribing to the Patreon or the Apple Podcast extra bonus episodes, you are missing great things like that for a very low price. Okay, that's my spiel. Anyway, he was one of those people. He confessed to murdering Adam Walsh, took it back hundreds of times. He eventually died of cirrhosis of the liver and AIDS in 1996 in a Florida prison where he was on death row for a completely separate murder. John Walsh, Adam's dad, learned from a prison official that he had spoken of Adam's murder to a nurse right before he died in September of 1996, but confidentiality rules prevented the nurse from confirming the allegation that he had perhaps made some type of deathbed confession. However, Toole's niece told a detective her uncle confided that he had killed Adam, and he did feel bad about it right before he died. Following Adam Walsh's murder, his father, John Walsh, expressed his disappointment in how Hollywood police handled his son's case, Hollywood, Florida. In 1997, he released his book, Tears of Rage, in which he wrote that the investigation was marked by the worst of the 7 deadly sins, laziness, arrogance, and pride. He wrote that they were a tiny local police agency that had limited resources and never manned a search anywhere near this size. We did have a gut intuition that mistakes were being made. Everything seemed so chaotic and disorganized, which is true. You probably do feel like that at the time that's happening. But you're trusting, because this is usually your first instance of this ever happening to you, you're trusting that the people you're dealing with deal with things like this all of the time. Like, I am trusting the Hollywood Police Department to find my missing child because they are set up to do things like this. He's saying he had sort of a gut feeling the whole time that they were not set up or experienced at all in what was happening, and he should have trust that. But at the time, you are so panicked, you are just leaning on anyone you think can help you with your problem. Among those mistakes that he's referencing was losing the bloody carpet from Toole's car, and then also the car itself. At the time of the investigation, DNA testing was not the greatest. However, if you're familiar with like all of the cases we've done, you know that like technology, like crime scene technology moves really fast. So even though that is you making those weird noises, Harvey, even though it's only 1994 when this new person takes over this case, technology has come much farther than when Adam was murdered. So he takes over this case. They attempt to have the blood in the car retested to try and confirm if it was Adam's DNA in the blood that they found, because the first time they tested it, there just like wasn't enough technology to even piece together something like that. So they're like, technology has come a little further. Let's retest this and see if we get something now. Well, they find out that like they can't find the carpet samples with the blood on it from the car. Like, whatever. So then they go and find the car, and the entire car is missing. because the car was mistakenly sold to a junkyard, by the way. Like, the car is gone. They sold it. It's probably destroyed for money. Whatever. So he's like, I should have known things like this were going to happen because I could feel it. Hollywood Police Chief Rick Stone, who said he had skimmed John Walsh's book, maintains that his department never had the carpet samples to begin with because the car was impounded by another law enforcement agency. Stone says there is no evidence to prove beyond a reasonable doubt that Toole murdered Adam. He was sort of going along with the theory of, like, he is a notorious liar. He had confessed, unconfessed, not only to this crime, but hundreds of other crimes. Like, just because he said he did this and you think you saw this in the carpet, it doesn't make it true, and there is no way you can say beyond a reasonable doubt that it's true. There's just no way. He's very confident in what he had ruled and, like, not prosecuting, things like that. John Walsh, along with his book, started doing a ton of advocacy stuff. Him and his wife founded the National Center for Missing and Exploited Children in the early 80s. The stuff I'm saying now is going to be some of the stuff I think you would be familiar with this case, if you're wondering what I was talking about. So they founded the National Center for Missing and Exploited Children. With help from the organization, Congress also passed several acts changing the way we think, investigate, and report missing children's issues. The Walsh family says that Adam's case completely changed procedure for investigating missing children, and the organization, which is Adam's legacy, has helped recover over 350,000 missing children over the years. And that same year, Congress passed the Missing Children's Assistance Act. That organization that they had founded also founded Code Adam, which, if you have ever worked retail, a library, a park, a government building, any other business like that, you probably know what Code Adam is. It is used in hundreds of thousands of locations and is the largest, or one of the largest, child safety programs. It essentially locks down the area immediately when a child goes missing. So, like, if you have a child in Target, I don't know if they do Code Adam in Target. I'm just, like, using this as an example. If you can't find your child, like, he was right there, you turned around, he's gone, you don't know what to do. You go to the front desk, you're like, I cannot find my son. A whole operation goes into effect if they have Code Adam, which we do at my work, which is why I am so familiar with it. So, this is what happens when a Code Adam gets paged. If a visitor reports a child missing, a detailed description of the child and what they are wearing is obtained, specifically what color and type of shoes the child is wearing. Because if your child goes missing in a department store or other store selling clothing, it's easier to change a child's clothes, but it's much harder to find and put on different shoes to these children. So they obtain a description of the shoes specifically. Additionally, all exterior access to the building is locked and monitored immediately. Anyone approaching a door to come in or out is turned away. The employee goes to the nearest in-house telephone and pages a Code Adam describing the children's physical features and clothing. As designated employees monitor front entrances, other employees begin to look for the child. So everyone will have a job. If you're not manning a door and every door is being manned, you are physically searching for this child. If the child is not found within 10 minutes, law enforcement is notified. If the child is found and appears to have been lost and unharmed, the child is reunited with the parent or legal guardian. If the child is found accompanied by someone other than a parent or legal guardian, reasonable efforts to delay their departure will be used without putting the child, staff, or visitors at risk. Law enforcement will be notified and given details about the person accompanying the child. The Code Adam page will be terminated when the child is found or when law enforcement arrives and takes over. That is what happens. It is an amazing system. It's nearly foolproof. It is not a joke. Not that it's ever a joke, but, like, these things will happen with every single instance of a perhaps missing child. It's not like, I can't find him, but I don't think it's that big of a deal. He wanders off sometimes. It doesn't matter. Because it can happen anywhere to anyone. That is the point of Code Adam. In 2006, on the 25th anniversary of Adam's disappearance, President Bush signed into law the Adam Walsh Child Protection and Safety Act. It expanded the National Sex Offender Registry, created a new child abuse registry, and strengthened penalties for crimes against children. If none of that sounds familiar, famously, John Walsh, Adam's dad, started hosting the new show, America's Most Wanted, in 1988. Contrary to popular belief, he was not the first choice for this show. The show was sort of adapted from a completely different show. I had assumed that John Walsh invented America's Most Wanted because his son had gone missing. That wasn't the case. It was sort of adapted from something else by someone else. And he wasn't their first choice as a host. They first asked a big crime author, former police officer, and then they contacted the nightmare that is Rudy Giuliani because he had just resigned as U.S. attorney at the time, and he would go on to be the mayor of New York, as we know. On a conference call, while they're trying to find a host, someone suggested John Walsh because his name was already out there from all of his advocacy work with missing children, and because there was a popular TV movie made about the murder of Adam called Adam, which was very popular for the time. After a lot of discussion, John agreed to host the pilot episode, and then he went on to host it for years, if not decades. And I've talked about it 100 times, so I won't go into it any further, but America's Most Wanted was legitimately one of the most terrifying TV shows I had ever heard of as a child. If you are also terrified, please let me know so we can form a little tiny support group for people who are traumatized by direct access to large criminals who were actively missing. In 2007, the case took an odd turn that I just feel like I have to mention, even though it is truly nothing, but it is a weird little side thing that had happened. Jeffrey Dahmer was actually questioned in the murder of Adam. It was alleged that he was in the area around the same time that Adam was murdered. Allegedly, 2 witnesses said they saw him at the mall that day. More witnesses said they saw a blonde man throw a child into a blue van, and at the time, Dahmer was working and his work car was a blue van. And I thought this was weird, but it came right from John Walsh's book. But when Adam's case was featured on America's Most Wanted, because obviously they featured John Walsh's son, because technically, even though they thought Toole did it, they still didn't arrest him and they still had no proof that he did it. So technically, the case is unsolved. So it was featured on America's Most Wanted. According to John Walsh's book, Jeffrey Dahmer's father called in and said his son was a pedophile. Perhaps he was involved in this disappearance. I don't know why his father would do that. They thought the MO was similar because Dahmer focused on men, young men, and was known to decapitate his victims. However, Dahmer's absolute youngest victim was 8 years older than Adam, and I don't believe that was the norm for his victims. I don't think their ages were that young. There is, especially back then, the correlation of being gay and being a pedophile, which we know is not true. It's just not a thing. That's not what goes on. But I don't know if maybe his dad had thought because of this, perhaps this type of situation. I have literally no idea. Dahmer basically told the police, I had nothing to do with that. And I am also sitting here telling you about all of the men that I did murder, and literally 8. So I don't know why you think I would lie to you about this one instance. And John Walsh did come out and say he saw no evidence of why this would be the case. There's nothing linking Jeffrey Dahmer and the murder and kidnapping of his son. So, because John Walsh had spent years solving crimes via America's Most Wanted, he didn't actually solve crimes, but his show and his access to the show had solved hundreds of crimes. His wife urged him to reopen Adam's case to finally solve it and close it. John said that Reeve kept pushing me and said, John, you've solved so many crimes. You've caught over 1,000 fugitives. We need to give it one big last push. You need to do it again on America's Most Wanted. He said, I know just the guy who can help us. He's a great detective. That man was Joe Matthews, a Miami Beach homicide detective who was the first person to see the 98 photos that were taken of Otis Toole's Cadillac, pictures that the police had apparently never developed. They had never seen these pictures before. Matthews was the man to notice the bloody image of Adam Walsh's face on the carpet. He said, "If you are looking at it, you can actually see a blood transfer from Adam's face onto the carpet." December 16th, 2008, at a crowded news conference in the police station, the police said they were convinced that Adam was killed by Otis E. Toole, a drifter, a convicted serial killer who confessed to the slaying and then recanted before dying in 1996. This is all according to the New York Times. I don't think I put it in there, but it was just, they had a lot of good information. John, Reeve, and their 3 children were present at this press conference. After they said what they said, John Walsh said, "Today is a reaffirmation of the fact that he didn't die in vain. For all other victims who haven't gotten justice, I say one thing: don't give up hope." He said, "This is a wonderful day in spite of why we're here." Chief Chadwick E. Wagner of the Hollywood, Florida Police Department said he regretted that the case had not been closed earlier and had attributed that failure in part to flaws in his department's investigation. He said, "This is a day that's long overdue. This case should have been closed years ago." Chief Wagner said the announcement was not the result of any new discovery, but rather the accumulation of all the circumstantial evidence over the years. He said what was there was everything that was in front of our face for years. Chief Wagner said the investigation had always focused on Mr. Toole and added that the case was strong enough for the police to have charged him before his death, even though they didn't. John Walsh said that at a news conference Tuesday that while his family would never recover from Adam's death, it could finally move on. He said it's not about closure, it's about justice, which I believe. They spent all this time advocating for missing and exploited children. He is catching all of these fugitives from unsolved crimes on his TV show. I don't think he needed closure. I think he wanted what he had been giving to everyone else. In 2019, Otis Toole was featured in the miniseries The Confession Killer on Netflix, where you could see Texas Rangers, which is like essentially their state police. They call them the Texas Rangers. You could see them coercing and feeding information and confessions to him, which shed further doubt on his numerous confessions to crimes. And a lot of the crimes he confessed to were investigated and found that he had no involvement and that they were false confessions. So you can see this play out in this Netflix thing of exactly how they fed information to them and like got them to confess to these crimes that they had absolutely no involvement with. But John Walsh and finally the police felt there was more than enough there to say that Otis Toole was definitely the one who was responsible for Adam Walsh's murder. And honestly, I believe it. Not only because of like the circumstantial evidence and how much it just made sense, but because of the fact that nothing else had ever come from it. And you know that they were looking at other avenues. They had it on America's Most Wanted, things like that. They did all of this work. I truly believe if there were any other option, something would have popped up over the years of their work with this. So yeah, that was the murder of 6-year-old Adam Walsh. That had insane ramifications from it. I mean, the National Center for Missing and Exploited Children, I think, is still a huge thing. Code Adam obviously is still a thing, and it works extremely well. There have been like proven results from this. And I got John Walsh on America's Most Wanted. The man who haunted my nightmares as a child. So, that is your episode for this week. If you, like I said, on the bonus eps, if you're not, you should be. Not just because it helps keep the lights on up in this bitch, but because it is an actual bonus episode. You could get 2 episodes a week. It's a no-brainer for me. And you will have one on Friday. It might be a little short because of the fact that I suctioned a hole into my own ear. So that's sort of like rearing its ugly head every now and then. And I'm sorry if the editing isn't the greatest, and the timestamps I'm like probably just not going to be able to do unless I can like read and find them in the transcript. Speaking of which, if you're interested or if you think it would be helpful to have the transcript of the episodes or at least the notes, let me know. That's something that can easily be done. I just like don't know if it's worth the work because nobody has ever asked for them before. But if you think it would be helpful, let me know. It's no extra work. I can just toss them right on up there. And if you're on the Patreon or Apple subscriptions, I will see you Friday. And if you're not, I'll see you next week. It is no big deal. Thank you for being here. Thank you for loving me. I cannot get, that is the Thanksgiving song from Bob's Burgers, and it's been stuck in my head for days. So watch it so it can be stuck in your head, and then it can be stuck in all of our heads, so we're not suffering alone. Okay, bye.